Good afternoon and welcome to Hard Talk Between Sisters, where we are sharing stories and empowering lives and inspiring many women and men throughout the entire world. A special welcome to our listeners in the African continent, our listeners in Canada, and our listeners in the United States of America, and of course in the Caribbean, from where we are streaming from the islands of Trinidad and Tobago. We thank you for joining us this afternoon once again. It's a Friday afternoon. It's a time to just put up your feet, again, relax, winding down from a busy week, have a drink, a hot drink or a cold drink, and just listen in to our Hard Talk Between Sisters. And this afternoon, again, we have Miss Michelle Abel joining us from Canada. She's a Trinidad and Tobago national who migrated to Canada at a very young age. And she started off a talk last week talking with us about climbing mango trees in Trinidad and picking mangoes and getting licks for it and stuff. You know, licks in Trini term is mean you get a little spanking, right? For, doing all those things that might cause you as a child to fall off the tree and injure yourself. So, Michelle, we're going to continue our conversation today. And firstly, let me welcome you to the program again, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm so happy to join you once again.
Okay, so Michelle, I'm going to hand over this conversation to you our first 20 minutes. And you mentioned last week about trafficking and that you had experienced trafficking. You had a trafficking experience. You want to tell us some more about that? Well, firstly, how did you know that you were actually trafficked?
Okay, well, thank you. And I guess, how did I know that I was trafficked? Initially, as a child, I didn't know that I was being trafficked or that I was even being victimized in any shape or form, except that I realized at a very young age that what was happening to me was inappropriate and it was scary and just very difficult for a child to process everything that was happening. But I think maybe before we speak about some of that for your listeners, I would like to share what is the definition of human trafficking. And so, human trafficking involves the recruitment, the transportation, and the holding of victims to exploit them for profit. So that can it predominantly it is for commercial sexual exploitation, but also for forced labor. And traffickers can control and pressure their victims through threats or force, mental and emotional abuse, and definitely manipulation and coercive control. So the difference with human trafficking and familial trafficking is just a similar but a little different. So familial trafficking, which is what I experienced as a child initially, was the definition for that is although similar in nature, familial trafficking differs from other types of trafficking in that it involves a child being trafficked by a relative or someone that is known to them. So it can be a family member or somebody directly related to the family and known to the child and or the family. So for me, in familial trafficking, it was family members and individuals that were supposed to be safe people, but unfortunately, that was not the case. And so my abuse started very young, and it involved multiple people. The movement of me throughout various family members and people known to me. And so, as a child, obviously, I wasn't getting money, but what I was receiving was toys, books, clothing, sometimes candy. So the perpetrators would reward my behavior with these items. And for a child, I can say, trying to process all of what was happening, I got so used to being told, either I was a good girl or I was a bad girl. And mostly if I showed any sort of resistance, or I was afraid, or if I cried, then the abuse was worse at times, and how it was actually inflicted upon me. There was a lot of punishment, there was a lot of violence, there was, you know, which I don't really want to go into because it will be overwhelming for me and potentially overwhelming for some of your viewers. But there was a lot of control and a lot of heinous abuse and violence that was inflicted upon me. But also, what I would like to share is that I was not the only victim in some of the abuse that was being done by family members and family associates known to us. I also had a cousin that this was happening to as well. And, it was very difficult because I was the eldest, and I was constantly being threatened by, if I don't do certain things, then the level of abuse or violence would be very aggressive, very hard. But so I want to say, in many ways, to protect other family members and other children, I I took the abuse. So in admitting that, it's been very that's very difficult, and I know that people don't always understand that. But if you're the eldest and you see that other younger ones or helpless ones, you sometimes say, it's better that it happens to me, because something inside of you just simply says, I want to I want to protect them because they're weaker, or they're smaller, or there's certain impediments or impairments that um, they can't handle the same that you can. So I don't really know, when I've been asked, well, where do you think that came from? um, I really don't know. I believe that it's part of the survival. I also felt at different times that it was my way of, in my mind as a child, 8 9 years old, I'm processing, like, I don't want these things to happen to them. So, and sometimes I had to witness it as a form of punishment. So it was better for it to happen to me, because I was able to handle it somehow in a different way than them. And plus, it was easier for it to be inflicted upon me, opposed to me having to watch it. So, so that's a little bit of what I went through. Maybe um, you can step in and I can catch my.
Yes, take a break. Yes, that was more than a mouthful. That was a three course,
Yes,
4 course meal. Thanks so much. And I hope you do have your hot or cold drink nearby, because this is a lot of talking.
yes,
All right. And I do understand that it is going to take a lot from you to really be able to recall the things that you experienced. But I want to go back to the familial trafficking and what that was explained. And I just wanted to add that with familial trafficking, it can also be adults that are trafficked by family members,
Mhm.
but oftentimes you find it's children and families because the children and families are the more vulnerable persons in a family. But
Yeah.
you do have adults, you do have family members who traffic their own adults. And I remember a case, a domestic servitude case in Trinidad very early on, 2013, when the Trafficking Persons Act was just passed. And the police officer, a police constable in the unit, and the director at that time, they went to a house in Trinidad because they had received a report through one of the embassies that this daughter reported her mother not really missing, but the mother came to Trinidad to work in a domestic as a domestic worker for a pumpkin vine relative. And when I say pumpkin vine relative, I mean cousin family kind of thing, right? So they made the arrangements for this big adult woman. She was probably in her late 40s or 50s, right? And she had a 20-something-year-old daughter. And the mother came to work in Trinidad. They made all the arrangements. They picked up at the airport, bought the tickets, everything. And she landed in the house in a part of Trinidad, which was in a wealthy, upscale neighborhood in Trinidad. And the persons who brought her into work, her bosses, were well to do persons in society, right? So this lady went to work in this home as a domestic worker. When she got there, they confined her phone calls to monitored phone calls. They gave her a uniform and maid's uniform and told her she had to wear that. And she was basically fed scraps of food, leftovers from the family, right? So the daughter, she did call the daughter, but it was monitored conversations. So she wasn't able to tell the daughter anything that was happening. Now, can you imagine a big woman in her 40s, late 40s, 50s, this happening to her? It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. These people are your family members, your extended family members, and this is what they're doing to you. So somehow the daughter was able to make a report to the embassy here in Trinidad, and that embassy reached out to the counter trafficking unit, and the director at that time and a police officer went to the house, right? Because they were given the address and everything, and they went to the house and they were able to locate this woman because, like, I think she had flagged down a workman. There was some workman that came to do work in the house, and she had red flagged him, and he used his phone or something to make the emergency call to her daughter, and that's how the daughter was able to call the authorities in Trinidad indirectly. So the mother was rescued from the home, right? Thankfully. And she didn't want to cooperate in a police investigation because, number one, these persons are her extended relatives and they are well to do family. And number two, it was embarrassing for her. So she just wanted to go back home. And that's what they did. The arrangements were made to send her back home, and they just recorded the statements and stuff, right? So, I mean, that's another example of familial trafficking for domestic servitude. So, Michelle, I think I've given you more than enough time to catch yourself,
Yeah, no, I
right?
appreciate that, and that is so important. And so, yes, I was gonna come back to say that yes, it predominantly happens to children, but that does not mean, it does not happen to adults. And so, thank you for sharing that story, because what we see too is that many adults, when it has happened, there's so much shame. It's a different kind of shame that they go through. And, you know, I've heard where they express that, well, I should have known better. But you can put that kind of blame on yourself. It's a situation that you're, again, we're trusting people, especially family. And we end up an unfortunate situation where we're taken advantage of. And so sometimes I think, from what I've heard, it's very difficult as you're older to really express what has been done to you. Most of the time, like you mentioned, Alana, they just wanted to be done and over with, and they just want to go back to just a normal quiet life. But unfortunately, children, we, many times, often, we don't have that option. And so we do the best that we can, but going back to um, you know, being trafficked, um, there were images for me that were taken, and to this day, when I started to express what it was that was happening to my mom, for instance, as in my late teenage years, and I said, like, these tapes were made of me. There's tape, there's footage, there's instant pictures and stuff that I knew, for instance, was in a box. And when all of that was brought to the forefront and to the attention of certain people, it was like deny, 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 and all of a sudden that information could not be found. And so this is also a stigma that I've had to carry. And at times, I can say that I have lived in fear. Um, I really struggled in my work, in banking, especially traveling, or I'd walk into meetings and people would be like, "Oh, you look familiar to me. Oh, I'm sure I know you." And sometimes I could say, "Oh, it's probably through work, or we must have connected somehow there." But every single time, for instance, I was told that, my heart just sank, because you're often wondering, well, where did those pictures end up? Where's those camcord recordings? Where did all that disappear? And so, having said all that, it still comes up for me from times to time. I did model at one point, but then that also led into being exploited for escorting and stuff like that. So I'm so grateful that I wasn't harmed in the way that I knew that people were ready to do a lot of damage to me and take me down a path that, in many ways, I don't think that I would have recovered as well as I did at different times of my life. Um, but it's carried on. It's always part of you. It's going to be, with you for the rest of your life. And now it's just a matter of, well, how do we deal with it? And how do we heal from that? And how do we become healthy from all that's happened to us? But one of the things that I do want to draw reference to, especially through my work in the Caribbean and in South America, and we see that there's, a culture and a mindset of incest. And I'm not saying that.
Okay, so Michelle, I think this is a really good segue
Okay,
um, for us to just take a little break. We pause for a little break,
sure.
and then we will come right back in a few minutes. You're listening to Heart Talk Between Sisters.
Heart
Wonderful.
Talk Between Sisters radio broadcast. Tune in to a heartwarming and enlightening radio experience like no other. Join us on a journey of love, laughter, and lifelong connections as we explore the unique bond between sisters. Our broadcast is a celebration of sisterhood, offering a safe space for candid conversations, shared memories, and inspiring stories that touch the soul. Whether you're a sister yourself or simply appreciate the beauty of this extraordinary relationship, this broadcast is for you. Discover the secrets of sisterly love, support, and understanding as we delve into personal experiences and heart-to-heart conversations that will make you smile, cry, and reflect. So, grab your favorite cup of tea, get cozy, and let our Heart Talk Between Sisters broadcast warm your heart and lift your spirits. Join us every week for an emotional journey filled with wisdom, connection, and the enduring power of sisterly bonds. Don't miss out on this extraordinary experience.
To listen to our station WCAN Radio for this and other informative programs all day long, visit www.wcanradio.us. To be a special guest in any of our segments or to support us financially through sponsorship, call 1-868-397-5961 or 1-678-856-3709.
Thank you for joining us on Hard Talk Between Sisters. And we are talking this afternoon with Miss Michelle Abel, who is based in Canada, Trinidad and Tobago National, based in Canada. And Michelle, you were sharing with us about some of the types of abuse that takes place, as part of the trafficking experience.
Yes.
And you mentioned about tapes that were, is it that the tapes, there was a recording of your experiences as a child and it was recorded?
Yes. So some of the actual acts that were inflicted, they were recorded. There are images with myself and another child, with pictures and stuff like that. So some really
Okay.
things and images of where there was abuse, um, meetings and stuff like that, or potentially being chained and different things like that. So very horrific images that it's one thing to have them in your mind and in your memory, but to know that some of that was actually filmed and photos were taken, and to know that as an adult, or to be able to speak about that and just say, well, I don't know where they are. I don't i don't know where they ended up. And this is what we're facing right now as a country, but globally, with images of children. And now we have a problem with AI generated images that are out there. So my fear has always been that at some point somebody will come across that, or it may be released. And it took me a lot of time to really deal with that part, because that was the second phase of my fear. So first I went through all the abuse, um, all that trauma. And then here I was, somewhere in my 30s, I would say. And then this kind of crippling fear came over me as I started to really travel for work, and certain men would say things. Oh, you look so familiar. I can tell you, like, I walked into a boardroom and I'm negotiating a gas contract, and there was like 15 men in there, and one just pointed out and said, I know you. And I was like, no, you don't. So that was my initial reaction. No, I don't think so. I've never met you. Oh, no, no. And he wouldn't let it go. And I remember sitting in that meeting and I'm speaking, but I could literally feel I had to control my knees from banging under the table, because that's the kind of fear that was generated in that moment, because this one man kept at me and saying, no, I know you. No, I know, I've seen you. And, those are the kinds of things that happened periodically in my line of work. But if it was in Canada, I was able to just say, well, maybe you know me from modeling, or the US, maybe you've seen my picture, or from banking. But there were some people that I've come across in later years that, you know, um, when you're a single woman in a particular job and you're traveling alone and they know that you're alone, there are a lot of things that men try to do. And then if they feel that they're comfortable enough, or they want to come at you because, again, you're alone and you're vulnerable. This is some of the things that I faced even in my adult life. And those were some really difficult times, especially coming from where I was as a child with all my abuse. And then certainly the majority of them, they had no clue. Even ones that I worked closely with, they didn't know much about my abuse or anything, but they were some of the same kind of perpetrators that were crossing some boundaries and crossing lines. And uh, there were a few attempted rapes in my later life. So my abuse did not just happen or just stop in my childhood and teenage years. It bled over into various parts of my life through my profession or through friendships or relationships, which wasn't very many relationships. I was a workaholic, but I wasn't good in a relationship, and also because we kind of tend to attract the things that we're not healed from. And so we tend to attract individuals that, um, for me, this particular one was of a different culture, uh, very misogynistic. The mentality was, women do what men say, very controlled environment. But that was one aspect. And then there was the other ugly side to that individual where, he was involved in pornography, then got into the wrong crowd with prostitution and drugs and gambling. So there's a lot of aspects of my life throughout the years that, again, I will say, because of not being healed, and even though I tried to be proactive in it, and I put myself in women's groups and did all those things, but in my own personal life there was a lot of trauma that was being inflicted upon me.
Wow, Michelle, I mean, those are some very personal things that you've just shared. And I could tell you that I could identify with when you talked about single women traveling for work. And it's almost like men prey on that, prey on that, because they figure, okay, you're not accompanied by anyone, number one, and then number two, you're single, you're on the market, basically. So men make a lot of assumptions that because you're single and you're on the market, in inverted commas, that you would be open to anything and everything, you know. So I know I can totally relate to that, and especially when you're operating in a man's world, as we call it,
Yeah.
you know, is when I worked in the environment, in the law enforcement environment, the national security environment. There's a lot of men, male persons that we deal with, or that I dealt with, I would say. And one of the things that I had to do was, I had to sort of lay down the barriers, or lay down the lines, that you just kind of cross. Just don't cross those lines with me. If you cross those lines with me, I'll put you in your place, right? And I mean, I have also been subjected to some measure of sexual harassment. And
Yes.
people feel that the sexual harassment means that the person has touched you or anything, but verbally, you can be sexually harassed verbally by the words that are spoken to you, right? By a male counterpart. And I did experience that, woman, you work in a man's world, in inverted commas. And especially if, and you also, don't have that significant other person in your life, some persons just assume that that's a signal. It's like a green light to go ahead and assume that you can engage in some type of romantic or other type of physical activity with this woman because she's single and she's on the market, you know. And what I had to say, or make sure, not just say it also, but in terms of how I interact with men, is that they had to know, don't cross this line. Just do not cross this line. If you cross this line, there will be consequences,
Absolutely.
right? And I have been a victim of sexual harassment verbally, right? Where the person, men, some of them, they feel that they could say certain things to you and stuff because, they could talk in a particular way and stuff, which is very disrespectful and stuff. And you also have to draw the line there because it starts with something where they will test the waters, and they might test the waters either through a physical touch, or they may test the waters through something they say to you to see how you respond and how you react. And based on how you respond and how you react, then they'll know if they can go a little further and a little further and a little further. So sometimes it's simple little touches like touching your shoulder, putting their hand probably on your knee or on your arm and stuff like that. That's where I draw the line, because you're not my brother. We are not paliwalis. We are not best friends. We're not liming buddies or anything like that. We are working colleagues, right? We are working colleagues. Unless I advance something, you have no right to go there at all,
Absolutely.
right?
I
So that's what single women, married women also go through that. But you said something also where you said that even women also make it difficult because there are women who will compromise and they will decide to go that way because some of them are looking for favors, they're looking for promotion on the job, they're looking to go on to be favored on a particular overseas trip, they're looking for some benefits on the job, right? So they will compromise. They will compromise, and they have compromised, and they make it harder for us women. And I mean, I have seen in my own sphere in national security where there are women who have advanced because they've done that, and so, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to go and do that and figure that I need to do that to get ahead. No, God is my source. God is my source, and promotion comes from God, not from opening our legs and not from being like clothespins.
exactly. And I thought that I really should bring that up because when you're being classed or put in the same group with women that are willing to compromise themselves, and they want the favors and the promotions and whatever else comes with their agenda, their own personal agendas, whether they're looking for a marriage or they want to hook somebody because he's powerful or connected. So I internationally, I came across some of the women like that, and I was like, well, just because I'm associated with them, no, you're still not allowed to cross your boundaries. But men, there are men who target us, and they will find reasons, and I'll share this quickly without going into details. But for instance, one bringing legal documents for me to review on a deal for a client, and as soon as that person gained access to my hotel room, so now you're in my personal space, and I was sick, and so I had missed the meeting, but so the minutes of the meeting was brought to me, but that person then used the opportunity to basically pounce on me, knowing that I was ill and knowing that I had rebutted the advances on two other attempts from him, two prior engagements. And this is the thing, like you say, it makes it very difficult for us as women because then we're not looked at seriously, we're not taken seriously. We are competent, smart women in our field, whatever I believe, whatever we set out to do. And I believe too that it's a blessing and a gift from God if we walk in the spirit and we are guided by what God wants for us to accomplish and do. Then he will protect us, he will watch over us and keep us safe. But it does not mean that certain situations won't arise that we have to rise above.
That's right. And I do agree. And, it's a learning process, though, because I started in the national security field, well, pretty young. I mean, at the age, I think I was about 23. I may have been about 26 when I started in that field, So starting young and having to encounter and deal with all these male counterparts, it was a learning experience for me. But over the years, I mean, one thing I really have to thank God for is that I never compromised my value to get a promotion or to be promoted on the job, right? Or to get favors on the job. I never did that with any of my bosses or anything like that, and I really thank God for that grace that He gave me. But as I went along and stuff, I saw other women doing it and they moved ahead, you know. They moved ahead, and it could be, I don't want to first to dwell on this too much, but I think that is very important. Women are using our sexuality, and you will hear the other side where they will say, oh, as a woman, you have to know how to use your feminine virtues to get what you want. And yeah, there are ways to use your feminine virtues, but not necessarily your sexuality, right? Because as women, some men are softened by certain things, the tone of voice and things like that and stuff, and bat the eyes a few times and stuff, and they fall for that. You understand?
Yes, yeah,
So you're not using your sexuality, but you're using your femininity to get, to get something that you want. You might want a particular agreement on something and stuff. It's not necessarily anything bad, right? In the same way, I mean, when we go back and we look at like Adam and Eve, for example, I mean, Eve was the one who got Adam to fall and to disobey God,
yes,
right? Because Eve used her charm as a woman to get him to convince him to believe that what God told them wasn't 100% truth. And so men come along now and they say, well, oh, it's the woman that made the man do it, kind of thing, But I mean, that's a joke, that's a thing. It is true. It's Eve who's the one that convinced him to go along with whatever it is they were going along with. And when the serpent beguiled Eve, the serpent beguiled Eve, and then she went to her husband and passed on the lie that, caused all these things to happen that we are now paying the price for, I should say. So that's important. I'm glad that was raised and you shared that. You also talked about child pornography, because basically what you said is that those things that were on tapes, they were recorded. That is what we call child pornography. And I want us to touch a little bit on that in the context of trafficking in persons, that child pornography is a type of trafficking. And that child pornography can be where it is the picture of a child or private parts of a child's body that are reproduced either in picture form or in video form, and it is shared, right? And nowadays we look at things where, sometimes somebody may send you something, or you may see something on the internet, and it's child pornography, basically. Once you WhatsApp that to somebody else, or you send that to somebody in a private Facebook message or post or Instagram message or whatever, you have now become a part of distributing child pornography, yeah? And I think it's important for persons to know that. So we're going to stick a pin right here, pause, and we are going to be right back after the break. You are listening to Heart Talk Between Sisters.
Heart Talk Between Sisters radio broadcast. Tune in to a heartwarming and enlightening radio experience like no other. Join us on a journey of love, laughter, and lifelong connections as we explore the unique bond between sisters. Our broadcast is a celebration of sisterhood, offering a safe space for candid conversations, shared memories, and inspiring stories that touch the soul. Whether you're a sister yourself or simply appreciate the beauty of this extraordinary relationship, this broadcast is for you. Discover the secrets of sisterly love, support, and understanding as we delve into personal experiences and heart-to-heart conversations that will make you smile, cry, and reflect. So, grab your favorite cup of tea, get cozy, and let our Heart Talk Between Sisters broadcast warm your heart and lift your spirits. Join us every week for an emotional journey filled with wisdom, connection, and the enduring power of sisterly bonds. Don't miss out on this extraordinary experience.
To listen to our station
Give me my phone,
What you doing taking them kind of pictures? I'll tell mommy.
and I'll tell her you invaded my privacy.
Privacy? When you send those pics, you lose all privacy. It's like setting up a billboard with your naked pics for the world to see.
Those pictures are for my boyfriend's eyes only, and he'll never do that to me.
Yes, he can, or one of his friends or family, or someone can steal his phone. Sending naked pics can open you up to embarrassment for you, your family, and friends. You can be harassed by bullies. Your pics can be uploaded to websites and seen by everybody, even the wrong people, sex offenders. It can also affect you getting a good job in the future. Once those pictures go out, you can never get them back.
Okay, I'll tell my boyfriend delete them, and I'll delete these. I'm glad I have a smart little sister.
I'm still telling mommy.
Thank you for staying with us on Hard Talk Between Sisters, and we're having conversation here with Michelle Abel. And Michelle, we were just talking about child pornography and what that looks like in the context. It is a type of trafficking, child trafficking, and I just shared a little bit about what that is. Just parts of a child's body, basically, that might be shared on any type of social platform. And it could even be shared privately. That is considered child pornography. It is a criminal offense. And so, Michelle, in our last 20 minutes or so that we have, you wanted to share with us a little bit about abuse and what that looks like. I'm going to hand back over to you to talk to us some more about that.
Great. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to clear up one thing about child pornography. So, we try not to use that term, even though it is widely used. But we actually have a term called CSAM. And CSAM is child sexual abuse materials. One of the things that I was able to do was, like I think I mentioned, going to Congress and to petition for laws on the protection of children. And so in this mindset, we have to understand, one of the things I said to them, a child can never consent. How can a child consent to sex, to abuse, and to being filmed? So it's not, we try to divert from that, term that, oh, it's child pornography, but it's actually sexual abuse on that child, and therefore a child cannot consent.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that clarification. Now, you know that this is where the laws in my part of the world, which is the Caribbean, we still do use the term child pornography. In fact, it's written, it's defined in the Trinidad and Tobago Trafficking in Persons Act. And it's also defined in the Children's Act also, and in other pieces of legislation. So in the Caribbean, I mean, that's an area, I guess, where at some point, I guess they would look at probably reviewing the definitions and the terminology. But I really appreciate that that explanation that you just provided.
Yes, no, you're welcome. And this is where we were chatting one time and just talking about language again, and how important language is based on our culture and the material that's being put out there. But yes, like, it is known as child pornography. But when we really start looking at, well, how are we going to protect our children? How do we protect them from harm? Then if we understand clearly, a child can never consent to any kind of sexual abuse. So, but you're welcome anyways. Regarding what I wanted to address was incest. And so in my work in the Caribbean and in some of the South American countries, there's this underlying taboo topic. However, this quote unquote taboo topic is widely rampant throughout our Caribbean islands and, South America. And it's something that we are trying to bring more awareness because it needs to be addressed. And I'm going to say something to you right now. And I sometimes hate to repeat this, but this is how important it is. When one particular family member was raping me, I was told that it was better for him to do that to me before anybody else did it to me. And when I got passed on to the brother of that perpetrator, can you believe that there was this attitude that, well, it should have been them first kind of thing. Now, understand, I'm just a young child. And so you can imagine the impact of that. But here's the key points I told you. It's two brothers. And so throughout the years, I had heard things that were done to them. And I suspected that they had been abused. But let me tell you, I didn't process any of that until my 30s. And then when I had my breakdown at 40 and then had to do my recovery into my 40s is when I really understood and started to delve into what is trauma. I had to find forgiveness in what was done to me, even though I didn't hate them. It is so ironic and twisted in the same token that I didn't hate them. I still had respect. I still had to have, outings, meals, family gatherings, and pretend that I was normal. So imagine a kid is going through all that and you're processing this, but it wasn't until in my 40s after my emotional breakdown that I was like, but wait a minute, imagine that I have to now get to a place to understand that, yes, they too were abused. And in this scenario that I'm speaking about, the father was also a perpetrator and a rapist. And so the two boys, men, were also abusers with families who thought the world of them and that, oh my God, they could never do something like this. But this is what is happening within our families and within our culture. And you know what? There's an acceptance to this, and this has to change. And so this is something that really hurts me when I see material out there and I see what is happening to our young people. And trust me, I know enough families. I'm working with a few families right now in the Caribbean that 3 generations of women have been abused by the same 2 or 1 male perpetrator. And so you have to ask yourself, why is this happening? What is going on that this is allowed to happen and everybody is just sweeping this under the rug and it becomes, a dirty little secret? But what we're seeing now is that this is bleeding out into our young people because we're seeing more young people abusing young people. So minor on minors abusing each other. And what we do know for sure is that the majority of times it's because they've been abused, they're being abused, and there's a lot of adverse childhood effects and trauma that is occurring in their homes. So it's something that I think we as women, We need to stand up and speak up against this and talk about this, because I can honestly tell you our women and our kids are suffering, but they're not suffering from strangers. They're suffering from the people that are the closest to them and that are supposed to love and protect them. So it's not different than familial trafficking.
Wow, Michelle, I'm stumped. I'm truly stumped. But you know what stood out for what you just shared is I'm asking myself, is it that there are some cultures where it has become the cultural norm that it's okay to abuse, or some, because there's some cultures like in Trinidad where it's become the norm in those family structures for uncles to abuse their nieces and their nephews, and it remains silent because they live on a compound, for example, where there are 2 and 3 generations of families living on the compound or living in the same space. So my question to you, is it that you find it is cultural in those families, so it's culturally accepted, you take it? It's like with a domestic violence person, you say, well, you take it because my mother went through this and stuff, so you take it and you shut your mouth. Right. And my other thing is that, is it that the abused has now become the abuser? So, these are my 2 questions to you.
Yes. So culturally, yes, there is a cultural acceptance. There is a caste system that is going on in different parts of the world. I don't think this is the forum for us to address various countries with different things happening, but I think we all know we have our different cultures within the Caribbean. And so, this is something, it's what we're seeing and hearing, Alana, is that this is a norm. It's better for them to do these things to you than go out there. But there's an acceptance. It can be driven by fear, for sure. It can be driven because of its power and control. We know that. And because of the level of poverty that some of these families are living in. And this is just accepted. I have heard stories where, because they're living in one room, of course, the kids are seeing that the parents are engaging in sexual activities. Well, what ends up happening? We've also seen that brothers and sisters are doing those types of behaviors because children, it comes like our colloquial saying, monkey see, monkey do. And they do try it. Children are naturally curious. And so they will explore what they see. But here's the other thing that we're also seeing, and that I know this to be true, is that when the parents or the aunts, the uncles, because it's not just men, and that is important for me to say. I wasn't just trafficked by men. I was trafficked and sold by women, and women were some of the worst perpetrators towards me. They were very abusive and did very cruel things to me, but on top of that, turned around and blamed me because they stood with their husbands. So there is a mindset and a cultural bias that they protect the perpetrators, and this is what we need to stop. We need to stop this mindset. Now, I'm sorry, I hope I covered both your questions. Maybe I didn't, but if there's something else that you want me to address, I certainly will, Alana.
Oh, no, that was excellent. Your response was excellent, and it really clarified everything. And I know, as you said, there are certain things we don't want to specify really. But those persons who work in those environments would know what we're speaking about in terms of the cultural norms. It's interesting that comes up because this at the conference this week, the Free the Slaves conference this week in Jamaica, that's the main topic, really demystifying the cultural norms in the Caribbean region. That's the theme of the conference. And so those are some of the things that are coming out. What are some of the cultural norms? And we do have some societies within the Caribbean region that are highly sexualized. you know,
Yes.
highly sexualized societies and sexualized in every way, in that, um, and you said something too about, you're talking about gender dynamics also, where there is that sense that the male person in the household feels empowered to lord himself over the woman in the household, and the woman means his wife or spouse and his children. That he has that power and that privilege to do that. The uncles also in the extended families also feel that sense of authority to lord themselves over. And the women and the females in these households have this very subjugated kind of role, um,
Yep.
where they basically do whatever they're told,
Yes.
ask no questions.
Yes. They're very complacent,
Yeah.
level of complacency there. And I'm not saying that they may not be afraid. Like, I do hear that and I do understand. But then what happens when they are the perpetrators? They're the ones setting up the scenarios for you to be abused. So yes, they're staying quiet. They're not saying anything, but they're also allowing the abuse to happen. They're also involved in the trafficking of children when they're passed around from family members to family members or family friends. So, but is this a systemic problem? And this is what we need to address. And you know, we have to address clearly without people getting offended, because a lot of people love to be offended because it gives them an out to not address what needs to be addressed. And what needs to be addressed is, how do we really make positive changes? How do we protect our women and children? And what I can tell you is that worldwide, with my work, with my travels, I have seen that women and children are vulnerable. And there isn't a huge importance to really protect women and children. So I believe that right now is the time that in every part of the world that we're in, and your listeners, you have to become proactive. You have to be a voice. You have to petition the laws. You have to petition your government, because you owe it to your children, your grandchildren, and generations to come. Otherwise, we leave them susceptible to a life of tragedy. And how sad would that ultimately be?
Amen. Michelle, I don't think I would want to add anything more to what you've just said. I want to leave our listeners with that. And I really want to thank you so much for giving of yourself. I know this was really tough for you. I wouldn't say hard, it was tough. And you poured and you poured and you poured out onto the listeners. And I really pray that those persons who need to hear, that they would hear, the women and the children that need to hear this, that they would hear, and not just hear, but that they would listen, and that they will act. They would act
I agree.
based on what you shared, to spare them of the all the unnecessary things that they may have to go through as adults. These things can be avoided if, as you rightly said, the children would be protected.
Yes, it's through education and awareness.
Yes. And I thank you so much for giving of yourself and your time
Thank
and pouring out your heart. You poured out your heart and your soul. This was really a heart talk between sisters.
Yes.
Really a heart talk between sisters. And I thank you so much. And I pray that God will continue to guide you and be with you, and that He would strengthen you to continue your journey in life, and to continue sharing with others that will benefit others and save others from themselves and from perpetrators. So, on this note, I want to thank the listeners of Heart Talk Between Sisters. I want to wish you a wonderful weekend, and do really take to heart what Michelle has shared this afternoon. Consider, look around in your environment, see what's happening in your own families, in your own communities, in your churches, in your schools, in your workplaces, even when you visit relatives, right, and friends around the area, in your country, out of country. Be alert and be attentive to what's happening with our children, because our children are really being affected negatively all over the world. Our children, they are targets. They are targets of the enemy because they are young lives in the making, and they have tremendous potential that is being snuffed away by evil, by darkness, by wickedness. And so I want to thank you, and I want to thank Dr. Clarence Green for facilitating this program on WCAN Radio Africa. And I just want to wish you all a wonderful weekend. Michelle, goodbye to you.
Goodbye.
And goodbye to our listeners. We'll see you next week again for Heart Talk Between Sisters.
Heart Talk Between Sisters radio broadcast. Tune in to a heartwarming and enlightening radio experience like no other. Join us on a journey of love, laughter, and lifelong connections as we explore the unique bond between sisters. Our broadcast is a celebration of sisterhood, offering a safe space for candid conversations, shared memories, and inspiring stories that touch the soul. Whether you're a sister yourself or simply appreciate the beauty of this extraordinary relationship, this broadcast is for you. Discover the secrets of sisterly love, support, and understanding as we delve into personal experiences and heart-to-heart conversations that will make you smile, cry, and reflect. So, grab your favorite cup of tea, get cozy, and let our Heart Talk Between Sisters broadcast warm your heart and lift your spirits. Join us every week for an emotional journey filled with wisdom, connection, and the enduring power of sisterly bonds. Don't miss out on this extraordinary experience.
To listen to our station WCAN Radio for this and other informative programs all day long, visit www.wcanradio.us. To be a special guest in any of our segments or to support us financially through sponsorship, call 1-868-397-5961 or 1-678-856-3709.
Will you help stop women and girls being exploited for sex or forced labor? My message to you that are listening right now. All trafficking victims share one essential experience, that is, the loss of freedom. Whether it's a girl forced into prostitution at a truck bus stop or a man in a restaurant kitchen stripped of his passport and forced to work against his will. Millions of people are unable to live safely and freely. Not everyone looks forward to living every day. For thousands of women and girls, every day offers nothing but fear and violence. It is estimated that 4.8 million people are trapped in sex trafficking. Women and girls are disproportionately affected and account for 99% of victims in the commercial sex industry. The sex trafficking industry is worth millions. I believe our women and girls' value are greater. Our fight against trafficking does not stop. Through our training and awareness programs, we are working both nationally and globally to prevent human trafficking. We are developing new ways to train and implement awareness campaigns to assist organizations, businesses, and the community. This past year, in collaboration with the Counter-Trafficking Unit of Trinidad and Tobago, we have successfully conducted seminars and workshops to educate the general public about this horrible crime. We need your help to reach more of these women and girls, and in some cases males as well. Please support our cause. Your financial contribution can help to support our campaigns in the United Kingdom, Trinidad and Tobago, and across the globe, providing women and girls, and in some cases men and boys, with a choice and place to get information.
Your financial support will make a world of difference. Support us and help stop this horrible crime which has weaved its way into the fabric of our society. For more information, please contact Dr. Clarence Green. Contact us. Dr. Clarence Green, phone 1-868-397-5961, WhatsApp 1-678-856-3709. To support what we do, visit our webpage www.wcanradio.us. And for more information, I thank you in advance for your support and contribution. Contact us. Dr. Clarence Green, phone 1-868-397-5961, WhatsApp 1-678-856-3709.